Molly, you work at the center that your founder wrote the book, Trust in Schools, right?
Yes.
And you know, if you could ever think of a research enterprise vested in getting inside the institutions we're trying to help, you know, the center, the consortium would be it.
Yeah.
Come on up and
Sure. Okay, thank you. Good morning. Yes, I am from the Consortium on Chicago School Research. And Alan and Kara talked about the importance of approaching education reform and change and improvement through a systems perspective and social networks. And I'm going to build off of what they said and focus more on schools as organizations and really hone in on that relationship and trust piece. All right, let's see. Okay. But I'm going to I'd like to start by highlighting the work of colleagues of mine at the consortium, and what they have done in Chicago public schools. So in 2010, Tony Breik and colleagues published a book called Organizing Schools for Improvement. Some of you might be familiar with it. In that book, the authors state, relationships are the lifeblood of activity in a school community. The patterns of exchanges established here and the meanings that individuals draw from these interactions can have profound consequences on the operations of schools. I believe that the point of this quote is that we need to pay attention to a school's organizational capacity to maintain and build healthy relationships because it matters for school improvement. All right. So consortium researchers have been looking at and doing this kind of work for years, and they began in the early 90s by investigating which specific factors differentiated schools that were improving from schools that were stagnating in test score growth. Based on observations in schools, interviews with practitioners, an extensive review of the literature, and interactions with other researchers, they developed a framework called the 5 Essentials Framework, and they found that improving elementary middle schools in Chicago were generally much stronger in these 5 domains of practice. They were stronger in leadership, professional community, teacher professional community, parent-community ties, a supportive student-centered learning environment, and instructional guidance. As you know, and if you think about it, formal learning happens in the classroom, but how successful a teacher is with his or her students depends very much on the other aspects of the school organization. So it depends on the curriculum and the nature of the academic demand and challenges it poses, as well as the tools that teachers have to advance the learning, such as learning materials, instructional materials. It also depends on how actively involved and engaged families are in the level, in their children's education, and the level of outreach that schools make to strengthen those connections with families. It also depends on how safe, welcoming, and supportive and nurturing the school environment is and focused on learning for all students. It depends on teacher professional capacity. And the professional community of teachers and the quality of ongoing professional development and support that teachers receive, as well as the capacity of staff to work and collaborate together. And it depends on the effectiveness of the school leadership. They found that principals in strong schools took a systems-level approach towards strengthening the other essential supports, while simultaneously nurturing the social relationships in schools, which is so important for building trust. So for our purposes today, I'm going to focus in on those social relational factors of the framework, professional community, trust, and family community ties. In their work, they found that schools with strong professional community And that was defined as schools in which teachers engage with one another regularly in in reflective dialogue. They work collaboratively and regularly in teams. They share a sense of collective responsibility for improving student learning. They routinely share ideas and support one another and give feedback to one another. So in those schools with strong professional community, they were 4 times more likely to improve math and reading gains than schools weak in professional community. Schools with strong parent and community ties were 4 times more likely to improve reading gains and 10 times more likely to improve math gains than schools weak in parent and community ties. Well, those two, professional community trust and parent community involvement, were all related to that relational trust in those schools. So schools with strong relational trust were better able to develop that professional capacity and those parent community ties. Now, since the publication of that book, we at the consortium have been doing research on those social relational factors, and we found that what matters more than individual teacher qualifications for improving student learning is trust and professional community. That individual teacher qualifications only mattered in schools that were very weak in professional community and trust. In other words, the ways that teachers and other staff work together in the school is more important than individual qualifications. In addition, we found that strong professional community and trust is related to a variety of important teacher and student outcomes. Let's see. So professional community for teachers, in strong schools, it matters for job satisfaction, which I think is going to be a talk from another panel later. It matters, teachers are more committed to their schools, they're less likely to stay or to move to different schools. And in Chicago, safety is a big issue in the schools, and in schools with strong professional community and trust, teachers felt safer in their schools. The way that adults work together and the relational trust within a school also matters for a variety of student outcomes. In schools with strong social capital, the student behavior was better, they had better attendance, stronger peer relationships, and stronger peer support for academic work. And just like in the Organizing Schools book, we continue to find strong relationships between professional community trust and a variety of student academic outcomes. So our main takeaway from this work is that it takes strong adults working together, focused on creating supportive, trusting, and safe learning climates in schools to improve student learning. So what does this look like in practice? So I'd like to share some findings from a recent qualitative study that we've been working on. The study is, it's on school leadership, but by school leadership we mean both administrators and teacher leaders. And recall that one of the essential supports was that effective leadership support, and that nurturing relationships is an extremely important factor of that position. So to examine that idea, we did 118 interviews, all in high poverty schools in Chicago, both elementary and high schools. Each of those schools was rated as being strong in leadership based on teacher and student surveys. But we found that some of the schools had stagnating test scores and some of them had improving test scores. So we wanted to see what was the difference. Can we see a difference in those schools? And what we found, one of the most distinguishing factor is this collective effort. So in strong schools, collective effort is built and maintained in very intentional and strategic ways. And school leaders, teachers, and administrators actively steered the process of improvement by leveraging that social capital into this collective effort. Oops. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay. What does that look like? So in strong schools with a collective effort, they are focused on a coherent and ambitious vision and direction for improving student learning, and teachers and staff are working together to create common and actionable goals. Leadership is shared widely. Teachers and other staff are empowered to carry that vision forward. Administrators, this is very important, provided the time and space for teachers to collaborate while helping to coordinate that work within and across teams. So for example, in one school, all common planning periods were together with their teams. So it was very rare that teachers were taking their planning times to work individually. They worked together. And their teachers and other support staff were provided sustained support that was explicitly aligned with these collective efforts. And lastly, in improving schools, staff leveraged the social capital in the community through strong partnerships. For example, in one school, they partnered with a community organization to grow a garden. And the community members could tend to the garden. Teachers taught students about healthy eating. And so it was a way to bring the community in and teach students about gardening and sustainable gardening. All right, we know that this kind of collective effort would not be possible without strong relationships in schools and trust. So I want to leave you with, remember in the beginning when I talked about the quote from the Organizing Schools book on the importance of relationships, I want to leave you with a quote from one of our principals in one of our growing schools. We asked this principal, what would you tell a new principal about what it takes to help students learn and succeed academically? And this principal said, good relationship skills. And we said, that's it? And she said, I remember my previous principal told me this, and it just rings more and more true every year. The principal's job is relationships. There's so much involved with relationships. You can be really smart, you can be able to analyze things really well, but it's a people job. You're constantly involved with building relationships with kids, with teachers, with community, with everyone. And so having those relationship skills and working with them productively to get them on board with your vision, that's number one. Thank you.